Hello again, Pastor Michael Jarbo here. Welcome to another edition of Soul Care, conversations to help renew the spirit. I'm glad you're here. Check out today's episode.
Hey everyone, it's Pastor Colin here for another episode of Soul Care. It's not Michael Jarbo this week, it's me because we have a special guest, Dr. Robert Williamson. He's a professor of religious studies at Hendrix College and founding pastor of Mercy Church in Little Rock. So we're glad to have him today. He's a professor of mine when I was a student at Hendrix.
Yeah.
Last night I had a Zoom call with some of my fellow students that studied abroad at Oxford in my junior year, which was 10 years ago. So then I figured before this interview that you and I met my first semester at Hendrix 12 years ago.
That's right. You were in my first ever class at Hendrix.
Which seems absolutely insane to me saying it out loud that we've met 12 years ago.
2008 when I started. Intro to New Testament, right?
Intro to New Testament. It was like, other than like the required class journeys at Hendrix, you were my like first class that I had. So
yeah.
Uh-huh.
You were literally my first class at Hendrix too. So yeah, we go back.
Yeah. And then I had a religious studies minor at Hendrix, which requires 6 religious studies courses, 5 of which for me were from you. So, I jokingly sometimes say I have a minor in Robert Williamson studies at Hendrix. So anyway,
great.
It's good to connect and to see you. You were actually a guest at Memorial Drive a while back. How long ago was that?
It was April of 19.
Yeah, so some of you watching may remember Dr. Williamson has a book, The Forgotten Books of the Bible, about the 5 scrolls in the Old Testament, and he came and spoke about that, and also spoke on a panel at St. Paul's that same weekend, and so it's good to have you back in some capacity, and good to have a conversation with you today. How's it going?
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm glad to be back, even virtually. And I remember fondly the before times when we were all together.
People in rooms, meals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to see you. And thanks so much for the invitation to talk.
Yeah, of course. Looking forward to the conversation. So as each episode goes every week, we kind of ask some of the same questions and kind of get insight from different voices and different perspectives, just as a way to kind of talk about what's going on now in the world, but also just perspectives of different people, what's going on with them and how they're seeing everything. And so having said that, you were one of my professors and you're a professor at Hendrix, and as the semester starts up in this different way, just want to ask this first question of how you decided to go into academia and how you decided to pursue academics, especially in biblical studies. Yeah,
my trajectory was a long and winding one into academia. I actually majored in undergraduate in chemical engineering, which you never use as a biblical scholar. But I majored in chemical engineering, and kind of in the back of my head, I always thought maybe I was called into ministry. And so when I graduated from Clemson University, go Tigers, I did a 2 years as an intern in campus ministry at Wofford College, at United Methodist School in South Carolina, and then decided to go to seminary. So when I went to seminary, I thought I was going to be a church pastor. And when I got there, my professor, Walter Brueggemann, took me out to lunch one day and told me that I was talented in languages and talented at teaching and talented at writing, whatever, and that I should think about going to do my PhD and teach. And really, that was the first time that I had ever really thought about it. But he was right. Like I, however good I am at those things, I really enjoy all of those things. And I felt like maybe I was better suited to the teaching side of things than to the pastoring side of things. Although I have both of those in me someplace. So I went to graduate school thinking I was going to teach in a seminary, and then the job that was available that was the most interesting to me when I came out of grad school was Hendrix. And so I really had no idea that I was going to be a scholar at a liberal arts college, literally until I showed up to that class that you are in. But it has turned out to be a really good calling for me.
Yeah. So you kind of like pointed out this kind of like you have different facets to your vocation and calling, and you have kind of, you know, that pastoral and ministry piece didn't go away. And that said, you wear a lot of different hats. Before this conversation, I was asking you about like how to introduce you because of all the different things that you do. I was like, make a personal note. When I was at Hendrix, we had a intentional Christian community house on campus called the Bonhoeffer House, and Dr. Williamson was our faculty sponsor, so he wore that hat while I was a student there. But having said that you wear all those different hats, teacher, pastor, writer, scholar, how do you typically describe yourself, and how do all those things sort of work together?
That's a great question. You know, I think that officially, like out in the world, those things are not all supposed to fit together. Like I often feel like, and I think I would be better at any one of those things probably if I did not do all of them. There's something sort of deep in me. When I was trying to be a pure academic scholar, I felt this kind of longing to be with people in faith settings. And when I was trying to be a pastor in a faith setting, I felt this kind of longing to be digging deeper into academic work. And so I really do just kind of in my being sort of straddle that line. And it depends on where I am as to how I talk about myself a little bit. So, so I mean, first and foremost, I'm a scholar of the Hebrew Bible and of the Bible. And so probably that's my first identity. But, you know, if you met me at Mercy Church, like I know people who have been at Mercy Church for a couple of years and never had any idea that I was an academic, because there I'm their pastor. And so I'm drawing on both things most of the time. The one that I'm trying to grow into is writer, which is like thinking of yourself as a scholar is different in my mind than thinking of yourself as a writer.
Like writing falls under the umbrella, like I guess you like write as part of being a scholar. It's like one of the tasks you do.
It is, but also scholarly writing is a different beat than writing for like real people.
Right.
And so academic writing is a little bit impersonal and a little bit, you know, like very like buttoned down, and you're trying to like always justify your sources, like use your sources and all those things. Where being a writer to me is something about putting your soul out onto the page along with what you're saying. You're in it in a different way. And I've just started really that transition in the last couple of years with the book that I came and talked to you all about, and was really what I would consider my first writing project, even though I've been writing for a long time.
Right.
So trying to think of myself as a writer is kind of a goal of mine.
So we've mentioned Mercy Church and you being the founding pastor there. So take a minute to kind of talk to us about what Mercy Church is, and also specifically how you see that connected to your life as a scholar and an academic.
So Mercy Church is a little church that I founded here in Little Rock in 2015. And I actually founded it as part of a sabbatical project I was working on as a professor at Hendrix. It's based on a model that I discovered in Atlanta, which is also called Mercy Community Church. And it's basically a church where most of the people there are homeless or housing unstable. And we've tried to set up the church so that it's not, you know, here's some volunteers and here's some homeless people, and we like have this transaction between volunteer and homeless people. But here's a community of people, many of whom are unhoused, some of whom are housed, and we're trying to be the church together, and sort of shifting that division that often shows up between people of different kind of economic backgrounds. So we get together, before the pandemic, we get together once a week. We cook dinner in the afternoon, we eat together, and then we worship together in a very kind of informal, collaborative style. We do a Bible study instead of a sermon. We sing, you know, people play instruments while we sing and things like that. I founded it because I felt like my academic work at Hendrix was getting detached from real stuff on the ground. And I worried that my students were going to get the impression that the Bible sort of floats off the ground in this kind of heady space. And so I started trying to do work in various ways. Even I think back when you were there, taking people down to Little Rock and, you know, having them meet people that live on the street and doing things like this. And so in 2015, I founded this church, and I had a group of Hendrix students actually come and teach Bible studies and lead Bible studies. I had people from Mercy Church go up to Hendrix and sort of give lectures basically on like what it's like to be homeless and what are the problems that people who are unhoused face. And so really it's a way, I'm trying to bridge the gap between the academic world and sort of life on the street. I'm trying to bridge it in both directions.
Yeah.
Sometimes more successfully than others, but it's been a really kind of productive way of approaching things, I think.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question that I didn't give you beforehand, but thinking about Mercy Church, I saw it in Atlanta, and I've seen how you do it in Little Rock as well, that you do, excuse me, you do Bible study in a really like interesting and I think really cool way. Can you kind of describe how you typically do Bible study at Mercy Church?
Yeah, the Bible study model that I use, I learned from a group in South Africa called the Ujamaa Center at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Theirs is a little more developed than what I do on a weekly basis, but basically the idea is how can a biblical scholar or a pastor evoke the kind of inherent knowledge of people who are gathering and then offer some insights from academia or from the theological world to sort of help them think about what they think the biblical text means. And so it's very conversational, and I'll say, you know, what is this text, where does this text connect with you? And they'll say, well, here's the ways I see the text connecting with me. You know, there's an unjust judge in this text, and I have encountered many judges that I thought were unjust in my life. And then I'll supply them some information about, you know, here's what the temple did in its time, or here's what judges meant in that time. And then they think, oh, okay. And then I'll say, so now what does that do to your interpretation? And so as a community, we build an interpretation together. And I'm sort of directing it, but I'm not controlling it. And sometimes we end up with an interpretation that I don't actually think is maybe a great one, but it's the one that the community owns. And so I'll tell them, like, this is not where I would come out with this text, but I appreciate that this is where you came out with it.
Yeah.
So
and there's something about like getting there together that is like, you know, saturates that meaning too.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So kind of moving to the more personal, there's an African proverb that says a person becomes a person through other people. So who is someone that's made a significant impact in your life in general?
In general. You know, I think that the person that comes to mind when you ask me that, and if you ask me on a different day, I might say someone else, but really was Walter Brueggemann, who I was talking about earlier. He is an Old Testament scholar who taught me at Columbia Seminary in Atlanta. And he's the one who kind of saw something in me that he recognized as being somebody who could work with text, somebody who could do theology. And he has this approach to the Bible that one ought to be always sort of thinking through the biblical text as like as a resource of symbols and ideas that you take then into the world to engage what's happening in the world. So for him, biblical study and like, how do I live my life today and in the political sphere? Those are always interrelated. And I've been deeply shaped by that in ways that I'm working on a book right now, actually, on Brueggemann's thought. And I keep discovering like ways that I've been shaped by him that I didn't know, like I had been shaped by him. So he has had a profound effect on my life.
Yeah. I will make a note to NDMC folks watching. We had a series earlier in the summer called Summer in the Psalms. And if you liked kind of where the pastors landed in the Psalms, you can partially blame Walter Brueggemann. Rested pretty heavily on his scholarship of the Psalms, which is just, you know, unmatched and just really awesome. In particular, the costly loss of lament, that particular chapter and essay, so good. And especially in a really difficult time, has given, I think, a lot of helpful words for us, you know, to lament well. So
I think that's right. And that was one of the things that he gifted me with. And also another professor I had at Columbia, Kathleen O'Connor, was recognizing the value of the lament tradition, both in the Psalms and in Lamentations. To say, you know, sometimes we need to acknowledge that life is difficult and God can handle that. And there's models for that in the Bible. So I think that was, in terms of my own kind of coming to embrace the Bible, that was an important thing for me.
So what has quarantine and stay at home in this kind of season of our lives, what has it taught you about yourself?
I have discovered that I'm kind of a restless person.
Uh-huh.
That I kind of, I'm only ever in the same place for maybe a couple hours at a time, and then I'm always off. Even if I have a Saturday where I'm not doing anything, like I'll leave home and go to Starbucks and read something or write something. And so in the pandemic, my family has basically been sheltered in place, since March. And I have discovered that I actually really love being more rooted and planted and present especially with my family. I have a 2-year-old daughter. And so in that sense, the pandemic has been a gift that I've just gotten to spend 6 months at home with my daughter that I normally wouldn't have. So one thing I've learned about myself is how much I value that kind of rootedness and being in place, and that this sort of restlessness is not necessarily something that is always good for me.
Yeah. So you're a Presbyterian.
I am, yeah.
But spend a lot of time with Methodist people.
I do.
Know them.
It makes my heart strangely warm.
Yeah, of course.
A cold Calvinist heart, yeah.
Yeah, so another fun fact, Dr. Williamson officiated mine and Landon's wedding.
Yeah.
And just the funny jokes from my Methodist legion of friends, just like having a Presbyterian officiate the wedding. It's still counted from what I understand. So
yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. It's in fact more secure that the Presbyterian did it. So
yeah.
But
seems to be going well so far anyway.
Yeah, I think so. We ask every episode of Soul Care the kind of classic John Wesley examination question, how is it with your soul?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a beautifully worded question. So my soul is, I think, maybe a little bit contradictory right now. On the one hand, everything is really great with my family and my friends, like people who are close to me. My family is healthy and we're together and we're getting to spend time with each other, and that's really rich for me. At the same time, we start school at Hendrix remotely on Thursday, and so we're sort of stepping into this whole world of doing things that I don't really, I've never really done them before, and I don't know how they'll go or how good at it I'll be. And obviously there's a lot of anxiety. I just saw my parents and my sister a couple of weeks ago, and there's anxiety about when will we get to see each other again. So there's this kind of interesting, like, this twofold, like, on the one hand, this time has been a real gift, and on the other hand, there's some anxiousness.
Yeah.
And I mean, so learning how to trust the future, I think, is probably, that is the lesson maybe that my soul is trying to learn right now.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question. What's like some way that you've kind of found yourself being able to, like, what's something you've been able to rest on or anchor yourself in to kind of, you mentioned, kind of trust in the future, like what's something that you've kind of been able to help like regain that perspective when things get a little crazy or difficult?
Yeah. So this is something that I've thought about a lot, like I've struggled with a lot. And part of it is, like, I'm an Ecclesiastes scholar, and that the whole point of Ecclesiastes is the future is not guaranteed you, so enjoy the day. Love the ones you love while you can love them.
Yeah.
And that is not a natural thing for me. I'm always thinking about, like, what the next thing could be.
Yeah.
And so coming back, kind of ironically, because most people find Ecclesiastes pretty depressing, but coming back to that point of, you don't know what tomorrow is, but you do know what's here today. And so instead of spending all your energy worrying about things you can't control, spend your energy loving the people that are with you. And so I've really been trying to lean into that. Some days pretty successfully and some days not so much, but
which seems very Ecclesiastes, like some days pretty successful.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Pretty appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think he was, the author of Ecclesiastes maybe was mostly not successful.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But yeah.
That's a comfort to me, yeah.
Yeah.
The short plug before we get into the speed round, that Bobby is also a co-host of a podcast called Bible Worm.
Yeah.
So if you like some of these short snippets you've gotten of Bobby's Bible reading, you can get more of it if you're a podcast person on Bible Worm.
Yeah, you can find us. So Bible Worm is the podcast.
Oh.
We're at BibleWormPodcast.com if you're
Mhm.
looking for us, or you can find us on Spotify or
Yeah.
iTunes or wherever.
Yeah, good podcast, really good. And remind us who's the co-host. What's her name?
So the co-host is Dr. Amy Robertson. She was my colleague in graduate school at Emory. She's Jewish. She's a director of education at Congregation Or Hadash, just outside Atlanta. And so we're both biblical scholars who have some values that overlap, but our reading positions are quite different. And so one of the things I love about it, we don't really plan where we're headed with the podcast. And so you get a lot of kind of us sorting through the creative tension of biblical interpretation. The theme song is sung by our very own Colin Bagby too. Yeah. So you should tune in just to hear.
It's a cover of the Robert Williamson original cover.
Yeah. Amy said that the way I sing the song suggests that it might have a tune. the way you sing it actually is quite tuneful. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I will say I really love the episodes that are on a New Testament text. Because I, obviously have a kind of particular Christian perspective on the New Testament. And so to hear Amy's perspective on the New Testament is always like refreshing and helpful for me, because it kind of forces me to step back and be like, oh, like I bring so much to this that may not be there or may not occur or be, applicable to everyone. And so that's always been really helpful for me.
She's so generous with that because, we're following what's called the narrative lectionary, which does Hebrew Bible scripture in the fall and then New Testament in the spring. And Amy's not a New Testament scholar. She's read a little bit of it, but she's like, well, I mean, I'll read it and tell you. So she's reading it both as from a Jewish kind of lens and also from somebody who's just not that familiar with the text.
Right. Yeah.
So things surprise her and trouble her that I just passed right over.
Yeah, it's really neat.
I'll have to tell her you said that because she, I think, worries a little bit that she's not scholarly enough on the New Testament side.
I think it's great. I think it's awesome. So we are moving into the 11 question speed round.
Yeah.
There's no like hard and fast rule here, but I guess the rule is typically like keep it to a word or a few words or a phrase or something. And you can kind of unpack if you have an answer you want to kind of describe a little more. But the first question in the speed round is fill in the blank. Ministry is blank.
Challenging.
Okay. 2, you are called to be brave, but your fear is real. What do you do?
Acknowledge the fear and do the best you can.
3, something people often get wrong about you.
If they meet me on a stage, they think I'm very gregarious, but in fact, I'm pretty quiet and reserved.
4, the last TV show you binged and loved.
Right now I'm binging Episodes. I like it a lot.
Okay.
Schitt's Creek was the last one I loved for real.
Yeah, really good. What is Episodes? I don't think I've heard of that.
Oh, Episodes. So Matt LeBlanc, who was Joey on Friends, he plays a fictionalized version of himself. So his character is Matt LeBlanc. He's trying to find the next thing after Friends. And so he gets into this show called Pucks, which is not very good. And so it's this whole like story about like what he goes through trying to regain his fame after 10 years after Friends is over.
Oh, nice. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
Favorite movie? This is always the hardest one.
Yeah. A Serious Man, I think. Although the Coen Brothers film. Yeah. I think it's favorite. Yeah. It is not like the film that I most enjoy watching, but the more I watch it, the more sort of the more layers kind of unfold about it.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's a Coen Brothers movie that you can watch it and think like, oh, somebody else made this like trying to be like the Coen Brothers, because there's some parts of it that seem like so unlike some of their other movies,
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like that one too. 6, a concert that you'll never forget.
Oh, I saw U2 on the Zooropa tour at Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, South Carolina, and the opening act was Public Enemy.
Oh, nice.
That was a good night. Yeah.
That's really cool. What was like U2 always has like a crazy giant stage production. What was kind of the big thing that you remembered that they did stage production wise?
The thing that they were doing on that tour, this was the stadium tour, and they had like this big screen, and they would like call people, like they would call the president and stuff. Like they would try to get people on the phone, and like Bono would talk to them. So I don't remember what all specifically happened at that show, but that was, they had gone from like Joshua Tree to Achtung Baby, and they were like, suddenly Bono was like, oh, I could be a rock star. So that was when they were first like super like doing all the stuff.
That's awesome.
So yeah,
still haven't seen them, but everybody that has seen them live, kind of marks that as like a band you have to see in person. So
yeah,
one day when concerts are a thing again, I hope.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now?
What's the name of the book? I think it's Sarah Kinzier, who's a authoritarianism scholar. I think it's called Hidden in Plain Sight.
Okay.
I should look up that title. So it's kind of, it's her sort of looking at where Donald Trump came from, basically. Sort of looking at that history from the 80s forward. So that's my kind of non-theological book. And then I'm reading a book by my colleague and your old professor, John Sanders.
Oh, yeah.
Has a book called Embracing Prodigals. He's trying to think about authoritative versus nurturant religion, and advocating that churches ought to be more nurturant than authoritative in their ministry.
A former student and friend of mine, Paul Richards Kwan, and I read a book together and like talk about it on Mondays usually. And so our next book is the Dr. Sanders book. So we're looking
right on
to reading. Yeah. What's on your bedside table?
A pile of children's books. Like a big, Sophies Squash is maybe the most popular
one.
I
was going to ask which one is your favorite or your daughter's favorite. So
Sophies Squash is pretty good. It's about a little girl who goes to the farmer's market and she discovers a squash. Like her parents buy it to cook it for supper, but she turns it into like a baby doll. And then she carries it around. And then in the winter, when it starts getting mushy, she plants it in the backyard, and then it grows a new plant. And and it produces more squash.
Oh, cool.
So it's a really good story.
Yeah, that sounds great. What's a snapshot of a moment in your life that brings you joy?
Yeah. The first thing that occurs to me is when I was real small, my family, so my dad and his 3 siblings and my grandmother and all of their kids, there's like 10 of us, I guess, would get together in my grandmother's tiny little house on Christmas Eve and have a big like dinner and open presents. And whenever I think about like, when in your life were you just purely happy, that's the first thing I think of, is my grandmother's living room on Christmas Eve. Nice.
Tell me one thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
I am grateful for my daughter. And that's probably cheesy, but she'll be 3 in November, and she's just in this stage where she is learning things, and she's fascinated by things, and she's like real hopeful about things. And it's just a real gift to watch her. And she'll say, hey daddy, why don't you do this thing? And I'll say, I'm not sure I can do that. Like, why don't you jump on the bed? And I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. And she's like, she'll just say, well, you can try.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that attitude. Like, she encounters an obstacle, her first thought is not, I can't do that. It is, well, I could try.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to sort of embody that a little more.
That's great. That's great. It's cool to see that question and the bringing you joy question kind of connected together. Like, it seems like she's in that state that you described of when you were a child, just like the ability to experience pure joy, like in those moments. That's really cool.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. When our time here on earth is done and you get to heaven, presumably, what do you hope that God says to you when you arrive?
I hope that God will say, I think that what I did was enough. Like, you did what you could do to live the way that I wanted you to live. I think I always feel this pressure that I could be or do more. And so just to say you're enough, I think that would be a really good thing.
Great. Well, that's the end of the speed round, and kind of coming to the end of our conversation. Thanks for being a part of this. I'm glad you accepted the invitation. It's been fun and also just personally great to reconnect and everything. So thanks for taking time out of your day to do this.
Yeah, this is terrific. Thanks so much for inviting me to the conversation.
And blessings to you in the new semester, and to you and your family and everything. And hope things continue to go well, and hope to talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much for checking out Soul Care. Join us again next week at noon on Friday. Have a great weekend. Bye.